Hey, moneymakers, welcome to another episode of Taking Stock Live. It is my pleasure being here with you yet another week. I'm Kalila Reynolds, and thank you to everyone who came out to Money Mission Talks last week, Wednesday at the AC Hotel. It was a huge success. I launched the Money Mission workbook, which you can see right over here. And for those of you who've already ordered your copy, a big thank you as well. A huge thank you. It is now officially available on Amazon.com. So head on over to the link in my description, or you can just type in Money Mission Workbook, type in Kalila Reynolds on Amazon, and you will find it. Exciting stuff. Well, tonight we are talking about quite a few things. We have a young entrepreneur. How young? 19 years old. And he is looking to shake up Jamaica's snack industry. And this young man, well, I'll tell you more about him later on when his segment comes up. So we're talking about that. We're also looking at Seprod's takeover bid for AS Bryden's, as well as Wisynco's latest results. So a lot in the manufacturing space we have to talk about. But first, let me know where you're joining us from, what part of Jamaica or what part of the world. Of course, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and subscribe to the newsletter at getmoneynews.com. The link is also in the description. And I want to know where are my money makers at tonight. And of course, come on, let's get this money. On this episode of Taking Stock, online investment brokerage HF Markets is expanding into the Caribbean. Who are they and what services do they offer? Caribbean Head of Business Development Fabian Perez joins us live. And the analysts weigh in on the latest market developments. Tariffs, and now tariffs. How will the looming trade negotiations affect global interest rates? We'll discuss.
But first, here's What's Hot, brought to you by JMMB Group, your best interest at heart.
Seprod has launched a bid to acquire full ownership of the Trinidad-based AS Bryden & Sons. Seprod bought a majority stake in the distribution company in 2022. The acquisition would see Seprod receiving the remaining 29.85% of Bryden's. The transaction is structured as a share swap, with minority AS Bryden shareholders set to receive 396 newly issued Seprod shares for every 1,000 AS Bryden shares. The offer is scheduled to close on June 5, 2025. The Office of Utilities Regulation says providers paid customers 175 million Jamaican dollars in 2024 for service breaches. The OUR said JPS paid $146 million to
Here's
affected
What's Hot,
customers
brought to you
for
by
breaches of the
JMMB
guaranteed
Group,
stand.
your best interest at heart.
On this episode of Taking Stock, Baked Biofoods is ready to shake up Jamaica's snack industry, and they already have their sights on regional expansion. Learn more about this company from their founder and managing director. And the analysts weigh in on the latest market developments. The manufacturing industry is very busy right now. Seprod has launched a takeover bid for AS Bryden, and Wisynco's Q3 results are out. Plus, the U.S. Federal Reserve is holding interest rates steady. What does this mean for the rest of us? We'll discuss. Battery distribution and solar energy company Tropical Battery is looking to raise almost 2 billion Jamaican dollars through an additional public offer. That's about 12.6 million USD. The company is offering 954 million shares priced at $1.87 each. According to the prospectus, the majority of the funds will be used to repay a $1.4 billion loan owed to CIBC Caribbean Bank. The offer is set to open on May 22 and close on June 6. Sagicor Investments and NCB Capital Markets are the brokers of the offer. JPS says it plans to invest $300 million to build Jamaica's largest solar plant and a battery storage facility. According to JPS, the project will take up to 3 years to complete, starting this month. It will include 133 megawatts of solar energy and 171 megawatts of battery storage. The facility is set to replace JPS's fuel-operated Hunts Bay power plant in Kingston. JPS said the facility will transform how it generates and manages electricity. Jamaica ranked third out of 175 countries on the Global Brain Drain Index, falling one spot. According to the globaleconomy.com, Jamaica has a human flight and brain drain index score of 9.2. This signals the country's sustained migration of young, skilled professionals overseas. The site noted that Jamaica's drop was largely due to war-torn Palestine climbing up from third in the previous rankings. Elsewhere in the Caribbean, Haiti ranked 10th, Guyana 12th, Trinidad and Tobago 38th, and Barbados 99th. Proven Properties has secured a $20 million loan from VM Building Society to fund its latest housing development in St. Anne. The development is being built in partnership with Skillex Development. The project is called Bahari and will feature 120 luxury residential units, including villas, townhouses, and condos in a gated community. The community will also include a resort-style pool, fitness center, and smart home technology. Proven said that several units have already been sold and the development is on track. First completions are expected in 2025. Billionaire investor Warren Buffett says he wants to step down as chief executive of Berkshire Hathaway at the end of the year. Buffett is one of the world's richest people and most accomplished investors. He took control of Berkshire Hathaway over 60 years ago, turning it from a textiles manufacturer into a conglomerate by finding other businesses and stocks to buy that were selling for less than they were worth. His announcement came as a surprise because the 94-year-old had previously said he did not plan to retire. Vice Chair Greg Abel will take over as CEO.
This is Kalila. She's the founder and CEO of Money Mission, a community of people who want to grow their wealth and learn about money. And guess what? She just launched her first book. She's been working on it for a while and she got the push she needed to make it happen. So of course, she had to celebrate with her supporters. So many of you came out to learn and support and meet other moneymakers. Kalila was so happy. See, she had a lot of fun taking pictures, signing autographs and meeting all of you. The Money Mission workbook is one way Kalila wants to fulfill her mission of helping people learn more about money and growing their wealth. She has lots of big dreams, and next time, it won't take her 5 years to write a book. Or maybe it will. I'm just the narrator. I don't know her plans. If you didn't get to come to the event, don't worry. You can watch the replay on YouTube and buy the book on Amazon right now. Kalila is so grateful for all your support. Let's get this money.
Welcome back. Welcome back. All right, let me see who we have in the house. We got Garfield Griffith saying good night from Spanish Town. Demar is sending blessings from far, far away. Raquel, as usual, is online saying good night, moneymakers, like and come in. Raquel is our like police. Dwight is joining us from Spanish Town. Humble Boss is checking in from Negril. The diplomat of the era says, let's get this money and congratulations. Thank you, diplomat. Javon says, good night, money makers and shakers, money movers and shakers. It's great to join you on yet another eve of a wonderful birthday. St. Mary, big up yourself. Happy birthday when it comes, Javon. Hope you have a wonderful day tomorrow. How Wow Records is checking in from California. We've got Explorer Regina Saskatchewan in Canada. The diplomat is in ATL. Bro is in Clarendon. Francis is in Miramar, Florida. Roswell is in Unity Hall. Kirk is in Waterhouse, Kingston. JT's in Kingston. Richard saying good night to the moneymakers. Kish is in London. Orlando is in Grange Hill. Beverly is in St. Mary. International. And we got Roderick in Paris, California, and Dean in South Carolina. Thank you all for tuning in. It is my pleasure, like I said, to be here with you, especially following such an amazing event. I'm still like on a high from the launch of the Money Mission workbook, available now on Amazon.com. Check it out and do place your orders. The hardcover version is coming very soon as well. I think it's also been approved for Kindle. So if you go there now, you should be able to find that. So from time to time, we like to highlight emerging entrepreneurs here on Taking Stock, especially when I meet interesting people. And I love to hear your stories about what you're doing with your businesses, how you plan to grow your businesses. And this young man, I want to say he stalks me. Maybe stalk is a strong word, but I've met him several places, and he shows up and he waits until I have free time. He waits till everybody passes so that he can talk to me. And we've had quite a few conversations. I was surprised to find out that he's only 19 years old, yet he has launched at least 2 businesses that I'm aware of. And so now he is taking the Caribbean by storm with his latest venture. It is called Baked Bio Food. Who is this young man? His name is Levavion Bailon DeMarquez, and I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. Let me introduce him to you. Levavion, good evening and welcome to Taking Stock. Where did Levavion go? Is he on? I don't know where my guest is. He might be having some internet trouble. He did drop off earlier. I see him on now, but backstage, but I don't see his camera on. So I don't know what's going on. Hopefully he is going to be on very soon. Are you guys hearing me? Am I on? Because now I'm wondering if I'm not on. Am I on? Hello? Is my internet working? Am I on? Tell me in the chat. Okay, I am on. All right, and I see our guest has finally turned on his camera. Levavion, rock and come in.
Hi, good night. I'm so sorry about that. It seemed as though my thing was not coming on. It was continually saying I'm backstage.
Well, yeah, because we weren't live yet. So you were backstage until we put you on stage, until we start the show.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so you're live now, and our audience is ready to talk to you. Let me just make sure I'm pronouncing your name correct. It's Levavion?
It's Levavion.
Levavion. Okay, Levavion.
My name is Levavion.
All right, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes.
Did you always want to be an entrepreneur?
To be honest, no. Originally, I've always wanted to be a dentist. I know that's not the common thing for persons my age, but that was always my main goal. However, after a certain point, I essentially had what would be an attraction to entrepreneurship, which started immediately after leaving high school, at which point I started a small cupcake brand, which gained some traction after coming into contact with the Jamaica Stock Exchange. And from there, it's just been, I wouldn't say smooth sailing, but I'd say it has shown to be extremely promising.
And high school wasn't that long ago, was it? It was like a couple of years.
It was not. It was a short time ago, actually. So
what did you study in high
I
school?
got an attraction. I studied the sciences.
And are you full-time an entrepreneur now, or are you going to school still?
All right. So for this in 2025, I am a full-time entrepreneur. However, prior to this, I was splitting the time between entrepreneurship and my time at UTech.
What did you study at UTech?
I studied business.
Okay, and you decided not to continue? Is it because the business is doing very well and you want to dedicate your full time to this, or are there other reasons?
I actually completed my time at UTech for a associate's degree.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
All right. So when I first met you, you had a cupcake business, which this is probably like a year ago, a year and change ago. You had a cupcake business. You were doing flavors of the week, so it was like a delivery. What was it? A subscription service, and you could order your cupcakes and get different flavors. And it seemed like a pretty good idea. It seemed like it was going well. But tell me how that business evolved for you, how the idea came about, and then what led to you switching gears.
All right, so I'm not sure if you heard of this company overseas. So this idea came after a short travel to Florida when I would have found this cookie brand called Crumble. And at the time, Crumble serve, and up till this moment, they serve weekly flavors. There's a thing where every week you go, there's a completely new flavor, and they have a flagship flavor which you could get in every single box. And for them, it was the subscription. It was you could go to the store and buy one box, and you'd get six new flavors every single week. And I thought that was so interesting. However, I knew nothing about making cookies or anything like that, but I loved making cupcakes. So I thought, how can I make this into essentially a cupcake brand? So I started doing that here on a small scale. So I thought of some flavors I could try. Some of them were rather basic. It's just we did give them some names that would draw attention to it. At which point we started going a bit more risky after we started getting a foothold in the market. And then from there, we've noticed that a lot of persons like specific flavors. So we started adding those flavors as flagship flavors. So by the time it came, we had our box of six, which was three new flavors every single week and three flagship flavors, which you could depend to be there every single week you come. And that went well. We got a lot of traction. And then we noticed that the cost to make these was rather high as it relates to specific flavors. So we started winding down our B2C, and we started taking on more contracts with a lot of private companies here who would have been making more corporate orders. So we started going more B2B, which yielded great results. However, at the time, based on what we're doing just events. And as any other business, we wanted to continue to scale. So our intention
But
was
you
always,
had some pretty big clients though on that B2C side. Drop some
yes, I
names.
did. We had clients at the Jamaica Stock Exchange with Dr. Marlene Forrest. We had NCB Capital Markets, Bank of Jamaica, and Scotia.
How did you get these big clients to buy your cupcakes on a mass
To be
scale for
to be
large events?
honest, yeah, when I first met you, that's actually when we had our agreements come in with the Jamaica Stock Exchange. So we started with the stock exchange, which was, to be honest, I can only say an act of God, because I came to the Jamaica Stock Exchange conference with I did no one has knew this, but when I signed up for the conference, I didn't even knew if I was going to be able to come because I had not bought a ticket. I heard about the event the day before the event, and it was the day of the event that I would have gotten a call from Mr. Johnson at the stock exchange who agreed to offer us a ticket to come. So when I came, the intention was just to let persons know about the product. However, after I got here and I had a moment with Dr. Forrest, she took an immediate liking to the the site of our product. She liked how we were doing it, and we came in at a rather competitive cost. So she gave us an opportunity to sample our products at the stock exchange. At which point we went down. We had an opportunity to sit with her. She tested her products alongside a few persons there, and they would have enjoyed the product. So we did a lot of their 55th anniversary event. And from there, I would say we name dropped into every other job, because once other persons heard, yes, he did the Jamaica Stock Exchange work, and they could verify that and saw that the work was good, everybody was just easier to convince.
And you found
So that was
clients at
just
that event as well, because I heard you say NCB. I'm sure you met them at that same event.
actually, I met one of the persons there. That would be, at the time, I met the wife of someone who works at NCB who agreed to be uh, essentially an advisor for us. So when we expressed to her that we are looking corporate clients, she said to us that her husband is always the person I should talk to as it relates to that side. So I spoke to him, and he led us to the marketing department for NCB, and from there it was just smooth sailing.
So you're really a go-getter. You're definitely a networker. You put yourself in rooms where you can meet the people who can make things happen. And when you say we, by the way, this is not just an entrepreneur saying we, even though you do all the work. I'm sure you do most of the work, but you have employees and you have factory space. It's a legit business.
Yes, so at the current moment, we have not just factory space, but actually a corporate office in New Kingston. And we employ at the current moment 8 persons to Baked Bio. So when we were doing our product as it relates to the cupcakes, we didn't do employees, I did almost everything. And then at the times when we had larger orders that I couldn't personally fill, I would then bring on persons who would come in part-time. However, after moving over to our new product, we were able to bring on some persons more on a permanent basis to allow us to get a lot more products done. So yes, we do have employees.
How do you have a corporate office, factory space, and 8 employees at 19 years old?
All right. So to be honest, I can't tell you that answer. I don't think anybody has a written down answer for such a question. I can just say it took a lot of sleepless nights and hard work to a point where at one moment I actually got sick from not being able to get any sleep because I was in office sometimes from at that time we were working out of Co-work Jamaica. They're no longer around now, but I sometimes would be in office 3 o'clock in the morning and just leaving and coming back at 6 again to start. So to be honest, I can say hard work definitely paid off, but there were definitely other factors that I can't count in now, but I can say was definitely at play.
I love to hear these types of stories and people who are driven. And when you're young, like you, that's the time to do it. You have all the energy, you have all the time in the world, and you're making it happen. You're doing what a lot of people wish they could do and just don't follow through on the vision. So you had the
Yeah.
cupcake contracts, the cupcake business, and at some point you decided to pivot to popcorn. Tell us about that change.
I'm so sorry about that. I was not able to hear you just now. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, I think where you are is a little bit noisy. So I was mentioning that you had the cupcake business for what, about a year? And then at some point you decided to pivot to popcorn. So what happened with the cupcake business and why did you make the switch?
Okay, so we had the cupcake business for 2.5 years, and from there we made a decision to switch on the basis that we wanted to do a product that everybody could
Wait,
access
for
that
two
would
and a
allow
half
us to.
years? So that means you started when you were what, like 16?
Yes, I started this when I was 16 years old.
Wow, still in high school. Which high school did you go to, by the way?
I went to 2 high schools actually. I went to Bustamante High in Clarendon in Lioneltown and Denby High in Maypen.
Oh, yeah, Clarendon boy. Okay.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. So when we started, I was in high school at that moment, and to be honest, as I said, when we started, we were doing it on a very small scale, to a point where I was actually just doing what a lot of persons at high school they were. I'm not sure if you would associate a lot of these people who sell candies around school. I sold cupcakes, and then found that I actually liked making the cupcakes. A lot of persons there liked what I made, and that's where it started with or making cupcakes. Before at that time we were doing just regular flavors. It was when we made the shift about 1 year ago for the different flavors.
And so what made you
So
switch to popcorn?
right, so the decision to switch came when I looked into getting our product on the shelf. We wanted to sell our cupcakes in stores, and we reached out to stores like High Low and a few other stores. But each of those stores were either one of two situations. Situation where A, our product isn't preserved, so it wouldn't last long enough on shelf for it to be viable, or B, they already have a bakery in store. So that meant that that dream was out the door. So we started looking into how we could preserve the product, at which point we reached out to a company overseas that I was acquainted with via an event I went to for food companies in Florida. That the name of that company is Kerry. They develop different preservatives, and I wanted something better than the BHTs that you find in other products. And what they developed was actually so good that it passed for the Bureau of Standards for them as salts. So we took on a small amount of that and we tried it. However, for the cupcakes, it did not work. It actually made the cupcake taste rather off. So we shifted at that point and we're like, is there another product we could put this in? And at that time, there's a company that sells flavors that you could sprinkle onto your popcorn at home. And so as such, we took an idea from there and we attempted to preserve the popcorn. When that worked out, we were like, okay, now we need to try the flavor. And we flavored the popcorn. We did so many test rounds of this that, to be honest, at one moment it felt like it was a dead end, because every time we tried something or I tried a flavor, people did not like it. They came back with comments that would dishearten anyone. However, we persevered and we've now reached what we would say is a flavor that has passed the majority of our tests.
What flavor is that?
Okay, so that flavor, which is our flavor that we're launching with, is we're doing two flavors. So that flavor is our sweet and spicy barbecue and our chili lime.
Oh, I'd love to sample this. Somebody was asking about samples earlier. I happen to really like flavored popcorn. One of the reasons I like it a lot is because it's very low calorie. So it's a nice low calorie snack in general. Chili lime sounds like a nice flavor.
Yes, it is.
So it's not that the cupcake business wasn't making money or was failing. It's just that you weren't able to scale that cupcake business because of the longevity of the product and in-store competition. And you wanted to find a product that you could scale. That's the reason for the pivot.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So, as it relates to the product for the cupcakes, as I said, we did rather well because our clients was, I would say, really great. The stock exchange being our main client at the time, they provided us opportunities for all their events, and their payments was on time rather early. Actually, there was one of our close time from when the event kept. So to be honest, we had great success there. We were highly profitable. Our issue became though that we were unable to scale as we continued going forward, and it was becoming a bit more challenging over time to maintain the situation where we were getting part-time staff, because it was harder to get part-time staff as most persons wanted a more permanent job, and we couldn't afford to do that because we didn't want to cut into what the quality of our product was in order to keep costs down. So we decided, well, we're not going to be able to do this in stores, so we have to find another way to be on the shelves.
I like that you weren't so committed to the cupcake idea. Even though you loved it, you said you liked to bake, but when you realized that you needed a different product to go where you wanted to take the business, you made that pivot fairly quickly. I have a few comments and a couple of questions as well from the audience. Learn, Grow, Invest says, congratulations on all your success. Natisha says, proud of your vision. Javon wants to know if you're Jamaican by birth, just asking based on the last name, DeMarquez.
Yes, I am Jamaican by birth. The last name DeMarquez is not the last name I had at birth. My last name at birth is Scott. I changed my last name in honor of a family member of mine that recently passed. So I'm not sure if you've noticed that when you met me, it was Levavion Scott, and I would have changed my name to hers when she died.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry to hear that, but that's a wonderful way of honoring that family member. Jason wants to know, where did you get the money to start your business?
All right, so when I started, as I said, I was going small. I started with $2,000 that I had from going to school. So it was saved up
Jamaican
$2,000
dollars?
lunch money. Jamaican dollars, so lunch money. So when I started, as I said, we started very small when I was going to high school. So I remember that $2,000. There's this supermarket in front of the Linerstown police station that I went to. And when I started this, I was doing box mix. So I took the box mix and the cup and the eggs and the oil, and I bought everything and I took it home and I made the cupcakes. And at that time, I did not even know how to make frosting. I actually got frosting from a friend of mine who owned a bakery at the time, and she would sell me frosting to put on the what any person who saw it would think is muffins. And that's how it started. It was as we continued, we had the profits that continued to come in, and that's how we continued to scale. So we started, as the words for the general time would use, we bootstrapped it all the way here.
Right. So you 100% bootstrapped up to this point. That's amazing. That's an
Yeah,
amazing story. Like I'd love to interview you in 10 years to see where you are and hear that story of coming from $2,000 buying your first cake mix in high school. We have a few other comments here. Dalton says, geez, I guess he's reacting to, the story that you told. Learn, Grow, Invest says, started my first company in high school too. Jason says, talk about turning passion into profits. Learn, Grow, Invest again says, I know someone from our conference who would love to speak with you in a similar line of business. So I'll pass on the contact information to them and you guys can make that link
definitely.
after. Says he made a business decision. Shells says him can sell the cupcake mix that adds shelf life. Ah, there's an idea. Selling the cupcake
That's
mix.
actually a great idea.
Mm. Michael wants to know if he can invest in your company. Are you looking for investors?
At the current moment, we're not taking on investors. However, it is a goal of ours to be a publicly listed company. As you would have recently highlighted, the micro market is coming on. It is definitely a goal of ours to be a part of that when it comes to market.
Christopher says, very interesting story. His business sounds like a good candidate for the proposed JSE micro market. So exactly what you just mentioned. And that's something that you would be interested in. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the proposed micro market. You think it's viable?
All right, so yes, I definitely love the idea for the micro market. I think it's well at the current moment, based on everything going on here, we definitely see where it's viable because right about now, the definition first when we think small and medium sized businesses, sometimes our medium sized businesses that we look into are rather large. And a lot of times the main thing that makes a lot of companies here fail is a lack of funding. Sometimes I've seen great companies fail because they didn't have the funding to get going. So to be honest, the micro market is a great way for a lot of companies to find their foothold in the marketplace, as well as an opportunity for smaller brands that are looking to scale to get the right funding at the right time to do so. So I definitely see our company as a great candidate for that.
Where does your business fall in terms of revenue? You don't have to give us an exact number. You could give us a range.
Okay, so as it relates to our last year when we closed at $5.3 million for general revenue, and we came in at a profit at about $3 million and a little bit of change.
How do you support 8 employees, office, factory space on that revenue?
All right, so at the current moment, what we did was in January we would have signed the contracts with a few private lenders who would have agreed to come on and lend funds to Baked Bio over a 2-year term, contingent on
Ah,
our signing agreements for our product. So we would have already had agreements signed for pre-sold units for our product, and it's on that basis that we'd have leveraged that to get into rooms with some private lenders who would have made their funds available for our use.
very smart. Shells wants you to explain the bio part of baked bio.
Okay, so that's a very funny story, to be honest, because it came out of nowhere. Because when we started, the name was Crave the Cupcakes, and when we were doing that, I liked the name because it was a spin on the fact that persons would crave the cupcakes. So it was CRAV' cupcakes. But every time persons see it, they would call it Crave D. So I was in the kitchen one day with a few of the part-time persons making an order for BOJ when at that time someone in the kitchen said to me, why is it you're standing over us looking like you're trying to make sure everything is so precise, like it's chemistry we're doing? And I expressed to them that the smallest thing can make an entire batch has to be thrown out. So when she said that, I was like, it is a scientific thing, but we consider it and we're like, well, it can't. When we tried the name baked chem, it didn't work. So like the closest thing is bio, hence the name baked bio. So it's baked biology.
Ah, okay, okay. So Philip says, youngest CEO on the JSE, go for it. We'd
Definitely.
love to see that happen. Speaking of which, though, Bladen wants to know where they can purchase your products. So you've launched already, right? Are you in
All right. So
stores now? Where are you?
So our popcorn we haven't launched yet. Will be available on shelves in September. We're currently in correspondence with Hilo. They'll be our main persons as well as Blaze gas station. So those two places will have the product first upon rollout, at which point afterwards our distributors will take it from there to get into other stores.
Okay. Ooh, wow. So how are you? All right. So your revenue right now or your funding right now is simply from the debt financing that you've acquired?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Uh, but you're also thinking about expanding regionally, not thinking about you're making plans to expand regionally. Tell us about that.
Actually, we're not just making plans, we have signed contracts. So our main thing was that when we started, I got everything done. I was ready to go. And then I reached this point where the question now was, what do I do? And the plan was, are we going to self distribute, or is it that we're going to ask distributors to come on? And every distributor we reached out to here either wasn't taking on new product, or they weren't interested because it's a new product and nobody knew it. So I was like, okay, the best thing right now, we can't sell them on a name because we have no name. So let's sell them on the one thing we have. We have the flavor, and we sold that. So I literally, when I said I left the country with no plans, I got on a plane with no plans of what to do, and I went to go see somebody in Florida, a friend of mine, and I asked him what it is am I going to do now that we're here? And he said to me that he knew somebody who would be very interested. I asked to meet with that person. Keep in mind, at that point, I was due to be back in Jamaica in a day. And this meeting seemed like it was never going to happen because when we got the call, he said to us that he was rather busy and can't take on anybody that immediately. However, somehow it worked out. I would say by the grace of God, it worked out. We had a conversation and they expressed to me that they'd be in Jamaica soon and that we'd be able to catch up. When they got here, we were able to secure an verbal agreement that yes, they'll be interested in the product after getting the samples. We sent out the samples and they came back with great reviews. And from there, it's just been we've got this documentation in place. We get to have our signed contracts from that distributor, as well as they would have introduced us to a lot of different distributors across countries like Trinidad, Dominican Republic, and Belize. So we have signed agreements for those places as we speak. So they will be a part of our first rollout launch so our main thing is definitely going to be exports.
So that will come in September as well.
Yes, it is.
So between now and September, you just have to produce. You have to make sure that you can deliver on these contracts.
Yes, we do, because at the current moment, and I never thought I'd hear myself say this, because to be honest, when we started, I never thought I would be doing the manufacturing. I actually reached out to co-manufacturers overseas who they were willing to take the product, however, based on we wanted it to say made in Jamaica, and we weren't able to use the flag on the product at that time because it wasn't made here and it would have come in packaging. So I found a workaround and I said to them, hey, can you make it and send it to me and I'll put it in the packaging myself? And that could be somewhat made in Jamaica. And they said to me, we'll do that.
Okay, Levavion is having some internet issues, but I'm inspired. Are you? Like, I want to know what gives him this deep business sense at such a young age. And I see a lot of you are saying you're inspired too. D. Griffith says, good evening from Mobay. I'm listening teary-eyed. Wish my 20-year-old was listening in to this young man. Share it with your 20-year-old. Let them get some inspiration too. Philip says, wait there, forget the micro. This sound like junior market vibes, man. And Levavion says, this is what you call making moves. Very, very impressive for somebody at his age. I feel like we are witnessing the early stages of somebody who is going to be a major entrepreneur, a name that we are going to know for years to come. And we can say that we saw him first on Taking Stock on May 13, 2025. He's not back on. I think his internet, he might have lost connection. Let me see what we're saying here. Fell off again. So we're probably going to leave it there. We did get a really good conversation with him. We heard about where he's coming from as an entrepreneur, what his plans are, the contracts that he already has in train. And I'm really impressed with this young man. And I'm really happy that we had the opportunity to speak to him this evening and get that story and get that passion. And I do want to do more of these types of interviews, like maybe at least once a month, highlight an upcoming entrepreneur. So if you know somebody who has a story to tell, shout us out. Let us know. Send an email to, who should you send it to? Send it to sachel@moneymediaja.com, or you can send it to news. That might be easier to remember. news@moneymediaja.com. So we can feature another entrepreneur. It doesn't have to be young, but an upcoming emerging entrepreneur with bright ideas and all the passion in the world. All right, let's take our poll question for this week. Jason says, bring him back next week. Can come on. Jason McKenzie can come on next time. Be inspired, but don't compare. Camicia says, this is a good look for Jamaica. King Irie says, I'm very inspired too. Jason says, I feel like I'm not doing enough for my own business. And Roswell says, nice moves, bigger market reach, continue on that path. So let's move on to our poll question. To what extent are you looking forward to new junior market IPOs now that the cap limit has been raised? Right, so we're now up to $750 million. We are expecting that several IPOs are going to come to market now because they have more room to raise more money. To what extent are you looking forward to those new junior market IPOs now that the cap limit has been raised? A, very excited, money ready. B, only a little excited. C, not interested, the market is still too volatile. Or D, other. Leave a comment. To what extent are you looking forward to new junior market IPOs now that the cap limit has been raised? Here are your options. A, I'm very excited. B, not very excited, just a little bit. C, I'm not interested because the market is still too volatile. Or other. Leave a comment. You can take that poll over on the community tab of our YouTube channel or on X or in our email tomorrow. Or you can just leave a comment in the chat. Let us know what you're thinking. Up next is your market recap, and the analysts are standing by. Time now for your market recap, brought to you by MyMoneyJA.com, the official data partner of Money Media. Get 10% off your subscription with the code MONEYMISSION. The JSE Combined Index lost 2,300 points last week. That's about 1%. 129 stocks traded across the main and junior markets for the week ending Friday, May 9, 2025. 41 made gains, 73 lost value, and 15 stayed the same. 97 million shares changed hands on the Jamaican dollar market, valued at $640 million. Wigton was the week's most traded stock, with 19 million shares changing hands. It started the week at $1.22. Transjam traded the second most shares. The stock opened Monday down 1 cent. And Deramon rounded out last week's most traded. Now let's see who had the biggest gains of the week. AS Bryden USD was the JSE's top stock, up 35% to open the week at 27 cents US. KLE Group had the second biggest gain, up 25%, and Dolphin Cove rounded out the top stocks, up 21%. On the losing side now, ISP Finance Services was the week's biggest loser. The stock lost 24% to start the new week at $8.70. G-West fell 18%, and Jetcon lost 17% to close out the week at 92 cents. Over on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange, the composite index lost 8 points or about 1% last week. Massey was the TTSE's most traded stock. It opened Monday at $3.90 TT. One Caribbean Media was the market's top gainer, up 15% to start the week at $3 TT. And on the losing side, Scotiabank Trinidad and Tobago fell 5.5% to open Monday at $50 TT. Over in the U.S., the Dow Jones, S&P 500, and NASDAQ were mostly flat last week. Motorists scored a win at the pumps. Gas prices were down 25 cents, while the cost of regular diesel dipped $1.89 and low-sulfur diesel fell $3.06. In foreign exchange trading, the Jamaican dollar crossed the 160 mark against the U.S. for the first time. It took an average $160.19 Jamaican to purchase $1 US last Friday. That's 72 cents more than the week before. One Canadian dollar cost an average $115.40 Jamaican. One British pound cost $212.30 Jamaican. And you could buy €1 for $183.37 Jamaican on average. Finally, on the crypto markets, Bitcoin prices were up 7% over the past 5 days. The cryptocurrency shot past the 100,000 mark again last week, trading at $104,103 on Monday, while Ethereum soared 42%, trading at $2,565 on Monday. Market Recap was brought to you by MyMoneyJA, the official data partner of Money Media. Will 2025 be the return of Jamaican stocks? It's been a rough couple of years, but like I've been saying, the time to start is when the market is low. Your objective as an investor, like any other type of trade, is to buy low and sell high. So now that stock prices are low, this is the perfect time to jump in. We already have several IPOs planned for 2025, so don't get left behind. Start your investment journey today by taking Investing for Beginners. Go to investingforbeginnersja.com. Let's get this money. This segment of Taking Stock, The Analysts, is brought to you by Sagicor Investments.
Disclaimer. This is not intended as financial advice. Please consult a licensed financial advisor before making investment decisions.
Welcome back. Let me see some of your comments. Read the poll. Our poll question was about the junior market cap being raised. To what extent are you looking forward to new junior market IPOs now that the cap has been raised? Your options were A, very excited, B, only a little excited, C, not interested, the market is still volatile. And I see most of the responses so far are either A or C. So no in between. Either you're very excited or you're not excited at all. Bladen Affair says A, very excited. Camisia says A all the way, also very excited. Sean says C, not interested. Gan says A, very excited. Tony says C, not excited at all. Philip says A, bring it on, unleash those rights issues and IPOs. Learn, Grow, Invest says A, very excited. Who else do we have? A few more comments. All right, let's take some of the comments. Christopher says, given the delay in raising the cap limit and proposed micro market, I think they should have raised it to $1 billion. Interesting take. Philip says, I agree they should have gone with $1 billion. Learn, Grow, Invest says, I hope the cap isn't misused because some companies were overvalued. Roswell says, IPOs these days are not like 2018. They get money to pay off debt and pay themselves big after businesses start to make good profits. I will keep buying the company I know that will give me cap gain. And then Sean says, after 1GS, IPCL, and Atlantic IPO, I'm not eager to go into any IPOs unless it's something really good or if it's a well-known brand. All right. Thanks for your comments so far on our poll question. It's time to introduce our analyst panel. And this evening, we are joined by Taking Stock analyst David Rose, as well as Assistant VP at Sagicor Investments, Jodianne Aris. Welcome back, David and Jodianne.
Night, Kalila.
Is Jodianne on?
Good night. Yes, I'm here. Good night.
Okay.
Good night.
Good. There she is. So, David, we're going to start with you. We're looking at the AS Bryden takeover by Seprod. What is going on?
So, to keep it simple, Seprod wants to increase its stake in AS Bryden from 50.14% to a maximum of 79.99%. So basically, what would happen is that for every 1,000 shares of AS Bryden you surrender in the offer, you get 396.43 new shares in Seprod. It's effectively like a share swap. What this means is that Seprod would have 79.99% ownership of AS Bryden, and some of AS Bryden's larger shareholders, somebody based in Trinidad, will become owners of Seprod, which is the main business, owning all these sprawling entities. So it puts into context. So Seprod, 50% controlled by Mustang Group and affiliates, and then Seprod, owns half of AS Bryden. AS Bryden owns 79.99% of CPJ. So, that consolidation, in terms of the interest, would, improve the net profit attributable to shareholders for Seprod. But at the same time, one thing I point out to everybody is, when you see these kind of deals, ask yourself, what is really taking place? So, put in perspective, assuming that assuming that the entire deal is taken up and Seprod's issued shares go from 700 million to 900 million. In the case of a coconut industry board, we do not have any shares in AS Bryden, but let's assume they don't have any shares. They're taking Seprod going from 22.28% to 17.94%. And what you would see is like Michael Conyers and some of the other major AS Bryden shareholders becoming the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th largest shareholders in Seprod. So, effectively speaking, you would have seen Seprod do a leverage buyout, of AS Bryden, and AS Bryden buying out the owners of Micron Holdings and CPJ, with shares, and then those owners getting a chance to have a stake in the main company. And since last year, Michael Conyers, I believe he's actually the deputy chairman of AS Bryden. He's actually the 5th largest shareholder in General Accident, which is also a Mustang Group subsidiary. So I'm just trying to connect in the dots for people to see that in every deal, apart from the rationale is put forward by the company, also look at what is the end result when the event does take place. It's a little bit of a headache that Trinidad is still behind the times, and I have to, give a shout out to NCB Capital Markets, because they are still the only broker, in Trinidad at the moment that allows for you to process your application digitally. So for AS Bryden shareholders here in Jamaica who want to participate in this takeover bid, and get Seprod shares, Republic Wealth Management in Trinidad said that your documents, which is the acceptance form and the actual your ID, has to go in physically to their offices in Trinidad, which is ridiculous, to be honest. But where there's a will, there's a way. So it's a little bit rough for the AS Bryden shareholders, because some of them, who would have bought in before communicating public, got diluted when there was the Micron Holdings acquisition, got diluted again with the takeover of CPJ, and now instead of getting a chance to move the shares up, from AS Bryden to Seprod, they're kind of be denied in this case because of just the inability to pay an expensive cost to send documents to Trinidad. just because of the time it will take for it to reach the offices and be processed. So it's an interesting, play. But one thing I took note of from Seprod's audited financials was that they have created a new joint venture. Well, it was a subsidiary, as they said, but they say it's a joint venture, called St. Thomas Development Limited. They have 50% stake in it. And, it was interesting to see the tweet by Seprod CEO Richard Van Dooy today about Morant Bay. So a lot of different plays taking place all at once. And, Seprod itself, is still gunning based on the timeline that the CEO Richard Van Dooy would have made back in 2023 for $1 billion US worth of revenues by 2026. They were at 133 billion in revenue for 2024. So they're just about 30 billion shy from that target in a sense. So something to watch out for.
You mean for the year so far?
So for the 2024 financial year, they did $133 billion worth of revenue. So at JMD, I should say. So to put that in context, it's still a pretty good increase, and that's 850 million USD in effect. So just 150 million USD left to reach that $1 billion US target in terms of revenue.
When does their financial year end?
December each year, December 31.
Okay. So how substantial or how significant because they want to acquire the rest of the AS Bryden shares. They already have some of the shares. How substantial has the acquisition been for Seprod's bottom line so far?
So to put it into context, from a console numbers perspective, AS Bryden was $77 billion, contributed $77 billion to Seprod's revenue last year. So you're talking about a little over half of Seprod's revenue is coming from its acquisition did in 2022. And most of the growth that they've seen towards that $1 billion target is coming from AS Bryden. So they acquired CPG last year. They acquired Retail Associates Limited in Barbados, which owns Stansfield Scott. They acquired Presta Bryden Pie. They created a new subsidiary this year in Guyana that's going to be focused on distribution. There already have 2 businesses in Guyana already, but they created another subsidiary for distribution in Guyana. So pretty interesting, developments in terms of this new organic business plus acquisition business as well.
You mentioned that for AS Bryden shareholders, they basically have been diluted. But how substantial is this for Seprod shareholders?
So it's going to be a bit of pill, but something to swallow, because as I mentioned a while ago, example of Coconut Industry Board, I believe they're the second or third largest shareholder in Seprod. Diluted from 22% to 17% just based on the assumption that all the shares are taken up in the offer. But at the same time, it does give space, once again, for them to potentially find more creative means again to fund acquisitions, because most of the acquisitions that AS Bryden has actually completed, has mainly been through a mixture of debt, preference shares, and ordinary shares. So whereas most acquisitions are done mainly with cash, funded by debt or internal cash on books, AS Bryden does it mainly by non-cash means. So when they acquired Micron Holdings in November 2022, that was done with ordinary shares of AS Bryden. When they acquired Stansfield Scott, that was a mixture of cash and preference shares. When they acquired CPG, it was a mixture of debt that they got from a loan and issuing ordinary shares to some of the former owners. And when they acquired the remaining 10% of Bryden Pie in 2024, it was issuing preference shares to the former owners. So I'm explaining that basically when Seprod goes to 79.99% again in ownership of AS Bryden, they can, explore more creative means again to potentially issue shares in AS Bryden and just make AS Bryden that platform to facilitate more acquisitions across the region.
But despite that, though, David, would you say would you say that this is a good thing for Seprod shareholders? Because ultimately it means that Seprod's revenue is going to increase, the top line and bottom line are going to increase, and Seprod is a good dividend paying company, by the way. So it's a good opportunity, even though you might be diluted.
So just for context, Kalila, Seprod already consolidates AS Bryden, so the revenue to bottom line is already accounted for. The advantage of doing this kind of transaction is that instead of just Seprod only accounting for 50% of AS Bryden net profits for net profit attributable to shareholders, they'd be able to account for 80%. So the net profit attributable to shareholders would increase, but revenue would still remain relatively steady state growing because it already consolidates AS Bryden.
Okay. I see some comments here. We're going to take the comments later on. I want to bring Jodian in. Jodian, you've been eyeing Wisynco's latest results. Their third quarter results are out. Share the highlights with us.
Sure. Just before I go in, I just want to say congrats on the book launch. I was able to make it. Good job. Good going. So as mentioned, we'll be looking at Wisynco. And as we know, Wisynco Group is our leading distributor and manufacturer here in Jamaica. And so it's largely around bottling and distribution of water and beverages, as well as they also do a bit of distribution of food items. And it's mentioned we're looking at their third quarter. So they have a year end of June, which means that the latest financials for the period, March 31st, 2025, as you said, would be the third quarter of the financial year for 2025. So the performance for this year so far has been actually below expectations. So if we look at Q1, which would have been July to September, there would have been a slowdown in that first quarter in terms of profit. And this would have been largely driven by the decline that we have been seeing in remittances, as well as a softening in terms of visitor arrivals, which should have had a negative impact for the company. We moved into the second quarter, October to December, and then this trend persisted as well. And it was further exacerbated by the fact that we're seeing cooler temperatures in October to December, which is seasonal, but still cooler year on year. So that would have also had some impact in terms of the demand for beverages. And, when we now look at the Q3 performance, January to March, we continue to see that there are lower demands across all the markets for their products. And even though Q3 is normally the slowest quarter, there was a bit of mixed results. So the company pointed that they would have seen a bit of resilience in core brands. However, there was a dip in terms of demand from hotels and food services categories. So in terms of what we have been seeing from Q1, in terms of the softening of visitor arrivals, that has been continuing into Q3. And also for exports revenues, those were hampered by a bit of logistics issues in major markets. So even though there would have been a growth in revenue, so revenue growth would have been about 4.8%, we know that there was a bit of slippage in terms of the gross margins. And so that is not, as we talk about, companies who want to look at the margins. And so slippage is actually not something good. When we look at selling and distribution expenses, those are higher year on year, and that would have resulted in a lower net profit for the year. And so there was a bit more in terms of non-cash related expenses relative to last year. So primarily depreciation, because they have been doing a bit of expansion. And so we'd have seen that having an impact in terms of the bottom line. But overall, though, from a balance sheet perspective, Wisynco has always had a strong balance sheet. So there's good cash balance, there's low debt, and there is growth in assets. So we're seeing the expansion playing through. And, when we look at the outlook for a company like Wisynco, even though there are some headwinds from the microeconomic factors, such as the lower remittances and, the reduction in visitor arrivals, and that has an impact on consumer demand. On the upside is that there is a bit of ongoing capital investments in terms of the plant and property equipment segments of the balance sheet. So we're noticing that there's growth there, which means that the company is positioning itself for long-term growth. So, in terms of how it is that we want to look at stuff, we want to think of it in terms of what management is seeing and how they're looking. So I think part of management expansion in terms of marketing and sales would be a signal to us within the market that there is some amount of confidence in terms of future revenue generation, even though we're noticing that we're having a bit of higher operational expenses. because they're doing that expansion currently in terms of the marketing. So they're preempting markets while it is that they're doing that expansion, which comes at a short-term cost, right? However, when you look from a long-term perspective, if there's going to be market expansion, then that could mean that there's potential for new products, which could boost, in terms of additional revenue streams. And as well as on the upside, we could actually see some amount of recovery in consumer demand. So there could be, a rebound in remittances. We could see an uptick in terms of visitor arrivals, and so that could have a positive spin-off for a company like Wisynco. I think what I'd really want us to focus on as investors is, even though there may be some dips in performance, and as you mentioned in the clip, ideally you want to buy when it's low. So buying at a point where a company is probably prepping for expansion is not a bad idea. So even though you may notice that, there's a bit of sluggish growth in revenue, or there is somewhat of a dip in net profit, you also have to factor in that the company is also making a bit of moves in the short term that could have a bit of a hiccup, but pressing forward for growth in the long term. And a company like Wisynco, which pays a good dividend, is very good in terms of while it is that you wait for that growth to come. So just to highlight that you want to look at your companies, not just that the bottom line is growing or increasing, but you want to look at the preparation that the company is also making in the interim, while it is that they're looking forward for future growth.
Interesting. But is the stock price reflecting these changes, though? Because I know sometimes the Jamaican market can be slow to react to these types of things.
Well, I think part of it is that if you consider a company like Wisynco, when we would have seen positive price movement, it would have been at a time where there was robust growth in revenue and robust growth in net profit, and we'd have seen improvements in margins. And coming into a year that they have been having so far, where there's a bit of sluggishness in terms of revenue, there's a bit of continued dip in net profit. The market is reacting in comparison to last year. So there is still not an uptick in terms of the price, even though we're saying that on a future basis, there could actually be growth that is to come based on the fact that they're doing some expansion work in the current. I think you probably want to look back at a company like Lasco Manufacturing, which at a point was really having slow movement in prices, while it is that they were doing the expansion work. And so every quarter you read that they're doing more in terms of the expansion. But when that actually hits, then you start to see that pick up in terms of revenue and net profits. So if the market is not, picking up as yet, then it could be a good time as an investor to take that bet on something like our Wisynco.
So let's look at the stock price here on mymoneyja.com. They closed today at $20.53. 52-week highs, $22.50, 52-week low, $19.80. So we're just right around the middle point between the high and the low for the year. Somebody was asking about dividend yield. For 2025, they're at 1.12%. 2024, 2.24%. I like that all the data is just in one place on mymoneyja. So that's just a quick overview from that perspective. David, you are also looking at the Wisynco results. Did anything stand out to you different from what Jody has already outlined?
So the company, would have spent another $2.7 billion over the 9 months in terms of capex, capital expenditure. And we shouldn't forget that Wisynco, in the prior 2 years, Wisynco was basically maxed out in terms of supplying the Jamaican market. So, they're coming to the tail end of that expansion. So for one, you're actually going to see an increase in free cash flow, going forward, because the company will be doing this level of expansion, again, until probably another decade or so. So free cash flow is likely to increase. At the same time, we shouldn't forget the fact that Wisynco, still, holds a pretty strong balance sheet in terms of cash, marketable securities. So what I have to commend the Wisynco team about is that instead of just, letting the cash stay on the books as just cash in the bank, they put still marketable securities, so bonds, equities, trying to earn a better return. And then even further, we shouldn't forget that Wisynco, would have acquired the Jamaican tea distribution rights in late 23. Wisynco, is still, a growing distribution company, and they're looking to add a new distribution warehouse, in the South Coast. They did pretty well in the North Coast in the Hague, Trelawney. But one thing I took note of, when I read Wisynco's report was when they spoke, of the slowness that they observed in the market, it kind of, is indicative and observing other company results. So you look across the market, for different companies, you're just seeing a trickle down in terms of or I should say, a decline in general revenue for most companies. Whether you're in finance, whether you're in distribution, manufacturing, you're just seeing a decline in company numbers across the board. If a company has subsidiary overseas that is probably doing better, the consolidated numbers are likely higher, but the slowdown in numbers, combined with the fact that we would have seen a decline in the air traffic arrivals, this year through Sanctions International is a little bit, a worrying sign, but this year, is a very active year because of a couple of things. One, general election in Jamaica. That is yet to be called. Now we're in May. July/August, probably going to have election.
Any day now, because I'm seeing the campaigners out on the road. So they are gearing up.
No, and the thing is, think about it. You're going to see more consumption, as you're having that kind of campaign activity. I need to supply certain divisions and so on and so forth. So whenever you see, campaigning period for general elections, you see that we're spending in particular market segments, media, consumption, consumable goods, and so on and so forth. So that's one factor. Second factor, a lot of persons have been complaining about the heat within the last week. Like everybody's saying they just cannot believe how hot it is. And we have not officially started summer as a season as yet. We start in a month's time in June. So they're going to see an increase or a relative increase in just, beverage consumption. The other factor is that Wisynco, I think so Wisynco, but as the negotiations, in the USA along the rest of the world take place, and these tariff effects, kind of go away, it's like going and some level of stability in logistics. That's going to create a better runway for Wisynco to grow more revenue through its export business, because I didn't know Bigger was sold in the UK. You see it in other parts of Europe like Belgium and so on and so forth. So Wisynco as a Jamaican brand has a pretty good reach, and they're able to meet local demand without sacrificing the export demand anymore is a good sign. And the reality is Wisynco's stock price, it's a slow mover. Wisynco listed in December 2017 at around $7.85 per share. I remember when it went to $10, that was around probably January 2019, during the 2019 stock price run up, the price would have slightly dipped, in the last year or in the $19 region. But otherwise, still a good for investors who watched IPO. The company is a lot bigger now, and the reality is Wisynco is not going to slow down anytime soon.
Yeah, so their high was $27.80 around July 2019.
I said 2019?
2019 July.
That was that fun time.
$27.80. And they had another little peak here in May of 2022, $23. No, that's not it. $24.41.
As I said, everything is a season, because in 2020 and 2022, you really saw prices trending up in that period. And Wisynco at the same time was seeing a general increase. But one other factor people should recall is that, or this is something that discussed very frequently, is that some brokers have restrictions against companies that's on the junior market in terms of how they allocate funds. So, in the case of Lasco Manufacturing, when they moved to the main market, some of the funds that were restricted, to not buy junior market companies could now actually buy Lasco Manufacturing as well. So that is one factor. So why you'd have probably seen an increase in Lasco Manufacturing stock price, within the last 2 years after graduation. But through Wisynco, I'm looking forward to seeing what's happening, and I hear that there are some new exciting plans and deals that are going to be announced very shortly. So let us see.
Okay. Well, thanks for those updates on Wisynco. We'll definitely be watching that. Our last topic. Oh, we're kind of out of time. So quickly on this one, Jody, and I noticed that the U.S. Federal Reserve has held their interest rates steady. So quickly, what does this mean for the U.S. and for us here in Jamaica?
Yes, so as expected, the Fed would have held their rates in May. Part of that would have been just based on the economic expectations that they're seeing, that there's a little bit more uncertainty in the markets, and so that would have caused them to hold rates, because there is the likelihood of inflationary factors based on how it is that we're seeing for a little bit of the tariff negotiations ongoing. So that would have been largely the reason. However, when we look at the numbers today for inflation, those that have come out at 2.3% annual inflation rate in April. And so that is really a very low figure. I think it's the lowest since 2021. And that is very close to around the targets that the Fed has, which is around 2%. So that may, provide a little bit of positive impetus for the Fed. However, I think largely there's still strong uncertainty. So in terms of when it is that we'd likely to see more rate cuts, is really dependent on how the negotiations continue to play out, because that's largely a big part of the factor in terms of what's happening in terms of expectation for inflation that the Fed is trying to monitor. I think that kind of sums it up in a quick way.
All right. Thanks, Jody, and thanks, David. David, we have to leave it there for this evening, but thanks so much for your contributions. We're going to take our final break and come back with your comments. This section of Taking Stock, The Analysts, was brought to you by Sagicor Investments. Not long ago, I asked how many of you would be willing to pay to watch Taking Stock. And a lot of you responded that you would pay, but some of you begged me to keep it free. And I get it. Everyone goes through financial challenges, and I want as many people to access this information as possible. So I've decided to give you the option to make a donation and help to keep Taking Stock free. Support us at patreon.com/moneymediaja. Some interesting comments here going on in the chat on YouTube. So regarding our very first interview, Learn, Grow, Invest, as praying for his success. Levavion doing his thing, 19-year-old entrepreneur making big moves and about to expand into the Caribbean market with his flavored popcorn. Roswell says, buy IPO, then lose 20% in a week. That wasting money, rotten apples. Roswell, why are you gauging performance by 1 week? We're in it for the long term. We're long-term investors. We're not looking at 1 week changes. Shell says the glory days of IPOs are over. Body Forever says, very proud of this young man, hoping he will hit the IPO. Sean says, the bull is slaughtered. US stocks are where it's at right now. I have no clue when the JSE will make its comeback. We've got Camisia saying, based on temperature changes, there should be a better Q4 for Wisynco. On the beverage side, the heat, I tell you. Learn, Grow, Invest says, I think we should stop living in the past. 2018 was 7 years ago. That's true. 7 years? Wow. They said, still opportunities now. IPOs will always be a part of our market. Troyan says, the JSE just put out its best results ever. Not a thing wrong with the JSE. The JSE as in the company, the JSE, or as in market cap of all the companies listed on the exchange? Or the JSE as a company. I feel like that's what you mean. Sean says, if this is the best the JSE has been, I think I really need to move my money to US stocks completely. And then Troyan responded, as long as I'm still making my profits to pay my light bills, I'm okay. The JSE is definitely it for me. I see some more comments here that I didn't really quite get through to just yet. Sean says, I'm just waiting for shorting on the JSE before I start looking back. Boy, how long are we gonna wait? Because when I first started doing this in like 2019, I remember Marlene Street Forest saying, shorting is coming soon. And oh no, I was pregnant during that interview. My son is now 5. Still don't have short selling. No. What else do we have here? Roswell says, Seprod will need to look at their dividend payout. I can get more out of Lasco distribution if I invest for dividends. Christopher says, what is the JSC waiting on to offer short selling? We need to develop our market better, and those options would help. I don't know. It's just been a holdup for years. I don't know if they're waiting on market conditions to improve. I really don't know what the situation is. And then we have Camisia. I think I read this one already. Troyan says, anytime GK spins off the manufacturing arm, the JSC are going to be #1 in the world. Vision 2020. Roswell, you are wrong. What Roswell says, Wisynco is a good company. I remember their stock price trading as high as $40. We just looked at it. They listed in December 2017. Their high has been $27 and change. But she says that's why I take profit as economic situation can change and affect company business. Sean says, I have PTSD whenever I go to the supermarket to buy chips and someone reminds me to buy the dip. Good one, Sean. So we're going to leave on that light note for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us yet another week right here on Taking Stock, the #1 business show in the Caribbean. Make sure that you get your copy of the Money Mission workbook. It's listed on Amazon right now. Go to Amazon.com, search for Money Mission workbook, search for Kalila Reynolds. It will pop right up. Place your order. And then when you get it, take a picture and send it to me. I would love to see you guys with your workbook and love to see your reviews on Amazon as well. Drop a review in there so that more people can understand, can get this practical guide to wealth in the Caribbean specifically. I will see you again next week. That's it for this evening. Thanks to our hardworking production team. Thanks to you, our viewers. Thanks to all our guests. Big up Levavion. Wishing him all the best in his future endeavors with Baked Bio and whatever it is that comes out of this young business mind. Until next week, see you later.